Excellent. We got couple of great folks joining us today, and I think we have a good number of people that have joined us, and so out of respect for everyone's time and with everything going on, let's go ahead and we'll get started with our webinar today. So before we begin, I just want to welcome you. This is the fourth of the TSMO Workforce Series, the fourth and the last one. And this one we're going to talk a little bit more about career pathways, paraprofessionals, kind of what can be anticipated for some efforts that are going on across the industry, and also a little bit more specific to NOCoE itself. If you didn't know, the National Operations Center of Excellence, NOCoE, is here to support the people who work in the TSMO community, the Transportation Systems Management and Operations community. And we really hope that you guys can find this resource and all the other resources that we have on our website useful. There's a few links for you in the bottom right-hand corner next to our pictures. Those are links if you wanted to click on throughout the webinar, or if you have any questions or discussion pods, you can definitely type. And greetings to you, John, in Utah, from Utah. That is definitely welcome. And so I do have everyone on mute, and that's just to allow us to get through the presentation. And depending on the number of people at the end, we might even try something daring and opening it up if everyone can keep themselves on mute, and then people can just talk freely. But at any time, if you have a question, if you have a comment, if you have any sort of inquiry you want to give to our speakers, please do enter it into the question discussion pod, and you'll see that question discussion pod be carried through throughout the webinar as we switch slides. The last thing that I wanted to mention is that we will be able to have the presentations available for you on our website.
Please try again. The host has not yet opened the conference room. Please check the conference date and time and try your call again.
In any case, we talk about the fact that career paths have to start in K-12, but for a set of occupations like we have with TSMO, where there's very, very little awareness by the public about the occupations themselves.
Your microphone has been turned
really
on.
A lot of visibility. This is even more critical because if you don't start there, the students to learn about the TSMO opportunities really don't begin until later in college, and then sometimes even actually once they're out into the workforce and they just stumble into it. So making a much more seamless approach to that requires that we're integrating that into K-12 programs. And so in one of the ways that we took a look at how TSMO is really evolving and what these career pathway models look like, there was a project called the National Transportation Career Pathway we undertook as the National Network for the Transportation Workforce. You can see that the centers represented here on the figure. It's a little bit switched on my screen. I'm not sure if it looks that way for you too. But there were 5 different areas that we're looking at: engineering, environment, safety, planning, and the operations. TSMO was really heavily focused on within that operations discipline, but I think the important thing to note is that TSMO was really found within all of those areas. And so thinking about the complexity and really the interdisciplinary nature of operations jobs, very important, because what that means is that it really complicates the career pathway model, and it makes it very challenging to really ensure that students are introduced to operations careers when you're in a traditional academic environment. So we have to find a way to account for the fact that there are lots of different get into operations careers and the nonlinear pathways to get there. And then when we think about TSMO in particular, so a lot of times we're focused very heavily on obviously the traffic component of that, but we also need to recognize that there are parallel opportunities within transit and then also within the private sector in the freight industry as well. So there are lots of different options, opportunities for students, whether they go directly into this at the state DOT level or they look at it from a broader perspective in one of these other areas. So trying to connect those dots and making it more apparent to students the broader range of opportunities that are available, I think, is important. And then another thing about TSMO in particular is that no matter whether it's from the standpoint of traffic or transit or freight, any one of those realms is going to require significant on-the-job training. So I'll just take the example of civil engineering, which may be probably the most traditional route that students have entered traffic-related career paths in the past, and even still to this day. So when we look at civil engineering programs, there's typically only one undergraduate level transportation course that's required. And so in that one course, it's really a survey course that covers everything from geometric design. It does touch on operations, but probably in a very limited way. The opportunity to really integrate TSMO may or may not exist in a lot of programs in that particular course, just because of the material that I heard in preparation for the SAT exam. So if that's the only exposure that students get, how do we start thinking about ways to make sure that number one, they even know what TSMO is. And then number two, they recognize all of the really tremendous opportunities there are that are for very exciting, very different career paths from what we might traditionally think about in terms of a transportation engineering role. And so I think the other thing important that came out of the work that we did within the NCCPI is that in looking at operations jobs in particular, we're seeing that more and more interdisciplinary skills that kind of cross over the traditional boundaries of academic preparation are being required. How do we think about changing education or really transforming it so that it better prepares students for the workforce future? So in connecting this back then to the guidebook, I'm showing the capability maturity model here of the various occupations that we developed within that project. And in looking at these evolving and emerging positions, all of these, of course, requiring university education, I think you can clearly see when we talk about, let's say, a systems engineer, there are multiple pathways that you might enter into that particular position. It's not necessarily a civil engineering role, but it could be. It might be that you go through a computer engineering. It could be that you go through an information technology. It could be that you go through an operations research. There's lots of pathways that might lead you into some of these positions. And so those skill set requirements, again, crossing traditional boundaries, and again, back to the example of the civil engineer, thinking about the kinds of things that students need to be at least exposed to, such as ITS architecture and things of that nature that traditionally would not have been within their program. So how to start to bring those sorts of ideas and concepts into their curriculum and make sure that they have that at least limited exposure so that they know what the opportunities are. And then the other thing that I think makes TSMO particularly challenging is that the academic background that students have that prepares them for any one of the careers that we're talking about may or may not have any exposure to transportation context at all. So if you're looking at security engineer, so yes, they're probably trained in a computer science program, but they're trained in that in a general way. They're not necessarily even understanding that there are opportunities within transportation that might be incredibly exciting and interesting for students to get into. So how do we start to connect those dots for students that might be in all of these diverse academic programs and may not recognize the options that exist for them? So what does this really mean? So we have to start thinking about career pathways differently. We have to think about how we approach education and training. And when we say that, I think it's important to understand that in thinking about the career pathways, again, instead of just simply saying, you know, yes, we have to start in K-12, and yes, we have to make sure that students are aware of this once they get to the university level, the really important part of that is that we have to have collaborative partnerships all across that pipeline. So K-12 has to be working hand in hand with higher ed and then with industry. So all of those entities have to be at the table for this to work well. And it's really, really crucial in an area like TSMO where technologies and skill set requirements and just expectations in the workforce are evolving rapidly. And thinking about how we approach education and training differently is looking for innovative ways to develop multidisciplinary approaches to education. How do we think about developing a course that might be housed in civil engineering, but it might be taught between faculty in civil engineering, computer or electrical engineering, and maybe computer science, and students from all disciplines are able to enroll in it. And then not only do they all get that same transportation context, understand the opportunities that they have and the unique skill sets that they bring to the table and how they all work together to really solve some of these challenges. And then the other thing I think, too, that's important that we'll talk about a little bit more later is the role of apprenticeship In this is for both maybe the roles that you think of traditionally in apprenticeship pathways, more of the paraprofessional that Todd's going to talk about in a moment, but then also in non-traditional occupations as well. So we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But then think about training. I think we also have to be thinking about that at the agency level as well, and really thinking about how we cross-train across the agency so that we don't build silos and that we are making sure that staff are aware of opportunities where they translate skill sets they have that are being applied in a different department or division, and they might be able to apply those within a TSMO context and develop a rewarding pathway as well. And then finally, we have to really think about how we connect the K-12, technical schools, community colleges, university, and industry. Again, all of those entities have to be at the table in thinking about how we design and how we develop innovative career pathway models and how we make sure that students are not only aware of but able to access opportunities to become prepared to enter some of these disciplines. So next, Todd is going to talk a little bit more about the paraprofessional pathway, and so we will turn things over to him.
Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks for taking time on your afternoon to last webinar. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we did when we wrapped up the NCHRP study that was really just on undergraduate and beyond type of advanced degrees and the careers that go along with that. We were challenged by NOCoE to just take that initial step through developing a white paper that tried to lay a range of options on how do you move forward, recognizing that from a number standpoint, a vast majority of our TSMO workforce is what we characterize as paraprofessionals, where you not necessarily don't need a degree, but you typically need some type of training beyond high school. So that's what we did. I'm going to highlight kind of the findings of that white paper. I guess first and foremost, it was kind of funny when we first started doing the reading. It was kind of, we looked in our backyard. ASCE, just over 10 years ago, commissioned a task or committee to look at paraprofessionals, recognizing that there's paraprofessionals in a lot of different industries. You think of the one that comes to mind most is law with paralegals, paraprofessional, somebody that assists somebody that's credentialed. And here's a definition of it that was done through the ASCE study. I'll let you read it here. Our next step was to that definition of engineering paraprofessional. We narrowed it down to be more paraprofessional. And I'll read one slide. I'll read this one. Position supporting management and operations of transportation infrastructure. A TSMO paraprofessional may exert a high level of judgment in the performance of their work. TSMO paraprofessionals can comprehend and apply knowledge of basic engineering principles and the solution of broadly defined TSMO problems at a cursory level. TSMO paraprofessionals provide traffic management center operation services and a variety of field services. Once we defined what a TSMO professional was, we started to think about what are those actual jobs. And we broke them into two buckets, two categories. One is when you think of a traffic management center, you have a lot of operators. Actually, when we did the NCHRP study, we saw a push to personalize more and more of the operations of TMCs. A lot, one of the main reasons is the the degree of some of the advanced technology introduced into these very high-value, high-profile centers. But we want to recognize that there's supervisors that may be non-agreed. And then there's the IT staff that support the TMCs. They typically supporting some type of specialized software. Some video walls are becoming more and more sophisticated, and kind of the back office IT support. And on the other side is what we characterize as TSMO field operations, and that's things like the safety and service patrol staff, it's the operational technology or the ITS maintenance staff, people that are out in the field supporting the cameras on the side of the road, all of the communications infrastructure. Roadway maintenance staff is included because of their growing role in things like incident management and just traffic operations in general. So that's how we characterize the paraprofessionals. Our next challenge for the white paper was we were challenged to take what we did as the NCHRP study and look and see can we follow a similar framework. Does it translate into the paraprofessional space? And some of it did, some of it did. So one of the things we thought we could do is take the approach we did for defining, as we define the positions, straight how by hiring different types of paraprofessionals that can help ensure your organization. We thought we could more framework that we developed for recruiting and developing and retaining that staff. We thought we could develop position descriptions and so on. We also, for each one of those positions, we tried to do two things. We define their current role, and we also tried to take an initial stab at what's coming down the road. And I gave two examples here. One is of a TMC operator. What's coming? And you see some of these, like using new types of data coming into the TMC on connected vehicles and Internet of Things, and how will that be translated into actions within the TMC environment. There's more of a push to integrate both freeway management and RTL management activities under one roof. So, not only understanding how emergency management partner onto incidents, you need to start developing capacity on how traffic signals function, at least at a very high level. Things that are coming, virtual and augmented reality for things like traffic incident management, and it's also within the training environment as well for all of these paraprofessionals. And you may not realize it, but artificial intelligence is creeping into all of our lives, not just in transportation, but kind of across everything that we touch. So those are just some of the skills or technologies that we see coming in the relatively short term within the TMC environment for TMC operate. It just demonstrates that there needs to be a recognition of additional capacity building. The other one that we gave an example, the service patrols, and again, new types of responding to new types of technology. If it's automated, it's electric, if it's used vehicles, dealing with them. Looking at things to help TMC staff when they're out running to incidents of providing better situational awareness through things like tethered drones and things like that. So we did that for all the positions that we identified. We also looked at some of the key factors shape professional workforce. Again, with all of the different types of technology, coming at us, having an agile and diversified workforce is important. One of the things that's I think more unique for paraprofessional compared to professional workforce is the privatization of those services. You know, a lot of TMCs are completely or nearly completely outsourced to private companies. See safety service patrols doing the same thing. So it's a factor of how much more of that is going to be privatized over time. On the other hand, you have the paraprofessionals tend to be more likely to be represented by a labor union. That brings challenges to deal with as well, kind of on the other end of the spectrum. As usual, retention is a big deal as generations of workers come into the workforce. I talked about this, I think, the last webinar. Just the anticipated rate of churn of new workers is expected to continue to increase. So where, for example, where historically you may think you may have like 10 years of somebody or even more, you know, you should probably plan for years and then those people move on to something else. So, and then obviously the training and career development that goes along with this is key to retention in many regards. You know, this is what we've heard is that's one of the ways that you keep retain them is through a robust training and career development program. We boiled it down to a couple recommendations. One was looking at a market survey, suggested taking that initial step in performing a capability maturity model evaluation of the different positions. One that we also looked at was doing a scan of the colleges and technical school courses related to TSMO Paraprofessionals, and then also in parallel, and this one might be harder or more challenging to gather, is the outside formal college and technical school, and get a better sense of what really goes into on-the-job training. And then last but not least, where NOCoE is rolling this all into you know, building on some of the great resources we already have as far as storing this information. So people like you participating today have ready access to the information. So with that, I think we're going to hand it back to Stephanie.
Thanks, Todd. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit more about apprenticeships and then about how we start to think about early education and really exposing students to TSMO career opportunities in that K-12 pipeline as well. So from the apprenticeship standpoint, probably most people think about apprenticeships with really the traditional Department of Labor registered apprenticeship model. It's an earn and learn model, and it has to include both experience and then the related training and instruction. Registered apprenticeship kind of got a bad rap for a while just because of really the sort of rigid way in which they are established and the burden on employers in terms of the reporting requirement that's necessary for it to be considered a registered program. And so the Department of Labor has really worked quite a lot over the last couple of years to expand apprenticeship opportunities and to really redefine what an apprenticeship model looks like. And so they now also, in addition to the traditional registered apprenticeships, they have more flexible approaches to apprenticeship time, and then have also expanded into pre-apprenticeship programs. So this starts to get at the K-12 level as well, because students are in high school can actually be part of these pre-apprenticeship programs. And they are focused very heavily on STEM disciplines. So anything from engineering and, you know, a variety of engineering specialty areas, computer science, IT, some of the high-tech disciplines that TSMO really requires workforce skills to be developed in. So there are a lot of opportunities for connections both at the regular apprenticeship level as well as the pre-apprenticeship program for TSMO. And so I think it's important to note that with these expansions, it's no longer just for traditional fields that might be thought of as, just the paraprofessional type of role, but there are also lots of apprenticeship models that are being developed, like I said, for engineering and computer science and other areas that are not normally thought of from an apprenticeship standpoint. This is really important because those disciplines tend to have some unique challenges that can be addressed through these apprentice models. And really with all of the things that we're talking about, the apprenticeships are the same in that partnerships are really the key. So in the case of the apprentice, you have to have that strong partnership between both the educational institution and the employer to make sure that the apprenticeship model is well developed and that the student that's engaged in it really reaps the maximum benefits from the program. So how can this really benefit TSMO workforce efforts? So I think one of the first ways is that these apprenticeship programs can really change, but I think in most cases start the conversations about what TSMO is and what kinds of opportunities are available within TSMO career pathways. And it does that by creating this experiential career pathway, and it's really K-12 through career. So apprenticeships can be developed, at the pre-apprenticeship level in the K-12 setting, or regular apprenticeship level that is for people who are no longer in high school. They may be enrolled in higher education at a technical or community or university college or university level. But they may not be. So this could be a direct pathway into a career right out of high school as well. So there's lots of flexibility there in terms of how we can direct people into apprenticeship programs and how the programs then can connect to careers. So I think that's one of the things that really makes this well suited for TSMO applications is that you have a variety of career pathways in TSMO, and you have a variety of ways the models can be applied. And I think enhancing diversity is one of the areas where apprenticeships really have kind of a leverage point for helping to develop the TSMO workforce. So there is a fair amount of research that addresses the fact that within these apprenticeship models, when they're designed well, what you end up with is a program where the student who is engaged in it not only develops that confidence and sort of begins to see themselves fitting into that career context, but they also develop a relationship with their mentor who's really guiding them in that on-the-job learning part of the program. And that can be incredibly valuable for diverse students because this really helps them start to see themselves in these roles, and it helps them to see that someone else, maybe that looks like them or maybe that just believes in them, also thinks that they're a good fit. So this can be one of the ways that we can start to attract gender and racial and ethnic diversity into some of these career pathways that may not traditionally be so diverse. And this is very important, not only for attracting the numbers of people that we need in the workforce, but also for making sure that we're bringing those diverse perspectives in so that we're able to solve the complex and challenging problems that we face within a TSMO environment. And so again, building those partnerships between academia and industry, absolutely crucial within an apprenticeship model. And the really important thing I think about this is thinking about how to make sure that that partnership strengthens both entities. So it's not only that you're developing this apprenticeship model so that the student is getting the best experience possible, but it's also looking at ways to make sure some of that training and at least skill set inventories and the conversations about what's required in the work, we want to make sure that's really happening and being translated between the employer and the educational institution, so that then on the academic side, curriculum can better address and reflect what the needs are in the workforce beyond just for students that are actually engaged in an apprenticeship, but for all of the students that are in their program. And so just one quick example that I want to share, this is something brand new that we're getting ready to start this summer. In this last round of expanding apprenticeship grant, Department of Labor issued the Southwest Tennessee Community College was the lead, and we're partnered with them as the University of Memphis. And we are focusing on IPS pathways that include TSMO at both the paraprofessional and professional levels. So our advisory groups are going to begin program design this summer. So, initially we were thinking of the advisory groups from a more local standpoint, but given that everyone will probably be virtually engaged in this over the summer, it really does give us the opportunity to open it up broadly. So if there are any people on the call today that are interested in being involved, please feel free to reach out to me, because we would love to have you engaged in this. And really the intent is for us to develop some pilot apprenticeship programs that reflect the needs within TSMO and provide opportunities for students coming through both a community college pathway as well as a university program to access apprenticeship experiences within a TSMO realm, and hopefully then to pursue a career pathway in TSMO and operations in general. So the pathways that we will have engaged at the university level are civil engineering, computer and electrical engineering, and engineering technology. We have analogous majors at the community college level that are also involved, and then are also looking at ways that we can connect into some of the other programs that the community college offers that may not actually lead to an associate's degree, like some of their partnerships that are developing skill sets and certifications that are related, such as CDL. So looking at ways we can connect those students in as well. So this is just sort of our entry point for developing, but we expect the pilot year to happen this year, and then next year would be more of our full implementation. But it's a 4-year project, and every year we'll be expanding the number of employers that are engaged, and then ultimately we want to take this to a point where the programs that are developed are scalable and replicatable in other communities. So how we are going to be looking at measuring success, obviously simple things like numbers of partnerships that are created and apprentices placed and apprentices that complete the programs, but also looking at the numbers of apprenticeships that are sustained beyond the grant period, because that's really one of the more important things. You know, when you have all of the grant funding and support in place to get these things started, it's really crucial to make sure that you're figuring out what are the elements that have to be part of this model to make sure that these benefits are realized on both sides of the equation, so that beyond that grant period, when the funding is no longer there, there is impetus for keeping that going. We are also going to be tracking the number of replications that occur both inside and outside of the Memphis area, and then really looking as well at apprentice and employer and educational partner perceptions all along the way, to really not only inform the development of the models themselves, but then also identify really what those best practices are that need to be translated to other communities. And so then finally, thinking about early education and how do we make those connections. So we've talked about obviously apprenticeships and pre-apprenticeships and how those can begin to develop those pathways early on. But I think it's important before we delve in much further to really talk about why it's so important that we have to start at the early education level. And one of those reasons is that students begin closing doors on what their career options are in their minds as early as elementary school. And I just read an article the other day that was talking about the fact that gender roles are actually defined as early as preschool. So kids begin thinking in their head about, this is or this is not a pathway for me really early. And so thinking about how to get in the door and how to make sure they are recognizing that there's a variety of opportunities for everyone very early on is important. And then for STEM fields, your educational decisions have to start in middle school. So the classes that you start taking in middle school are really going to determine what you're eligible to take in high school. And what you take in high school, of course, then impacts what you have to take in college in order to enter one of the STEM fields. And so we know that students that go into STEM take longer to graduate anyway. And so doing as much as we can to ensure that they don't have more roadblocks and aren't further behind if this is truly something they want to pursue. I think the other probably most important thing is the limited understanding and perception of transportation careers and really no concept at all of TSMO. I can't remember if I mentioned this in one of these webinars or in another one, but some of the things that have surprised me the most in a lot of the work that we have been doing is just the complete lack of understanding or lack of awareness of what transportation career pathways are in general, and limited understanding of the fact that there are STEM connections in transportation. I guess since I'm in it, I just assumed that would be obvious, and it's not. And so really, I think probably the biggest challenge that we face is that because transportation is something that we are all involved in every single day, whether it's driving to and from work in a non-pandemic environment, or it's taking transit, or it's ordering something on Amazon and expecting it to be delivered. We don't stop and think about what it takes to make those things happen, and because we're all involved in that system all the time, we tend to take it for granted, and it's almost invisible in terms of the people that make that happen. And so being much more intentional about making those connections for students in early years is really, I think, crucial to developing that transportation workforce of the future. So I wanted to share a little bit about another program that we have in Memphis, the Transportation STEM Academy at East High School. And this is a program that we helped Shelby County Schools develop, 3 years ago now. So this fall will actually be the first class of seniors that will be in the program. So we're very excited about that. We'll have our first graduating class next spring. But the really cool thing about the TSMO Academy is that it makes those connections between transportation and STEM. And more than that, that it's a true STEM for all model. So, a lot of times when people hear the term STEM, they think that this is only for people that are going into, at least an undergraduate, but probably even beyond that in terms of their educational pathway. And that's so not the case. There are so many opportunities for students in STEM that are, yes, obviously at the university level, but also that require community college or even just technical certification. So there's an opportunity in STEM for anybody that really has the interest. It's just finding the right fit for each person. And so this program, I think, does a really great job of building those connections. Students that go into TSMO Academy can focus in engineering, they can focus in general STEM, They can focus in aviation. They can also focus in diesel mechanics. And so helping students understand that all of those things are STEM disciplines and that all of those pathways offer unique and very viable job opportunities and career pathways for students. I think the cornerstone of the work is the fact that it is highly industry engaged. It's probably the most industry engaged K-12 project I've been involved in. We have more than 30 active partners, and by that I mean companies or organizations that are part of that. So it's many, many more people, but 30 different companies that are part of the project. And they do everything from developing curriculum, providing guidance. For instance, with the diesel mechanics program, the industry group that was assembled for that was 25 to 30 people, and they were involved in everything from designing the curriculum to interviewing and selecting the instructor for the program, to outfitting the labs, to providing special guest speakers and experts for particular topics, to developing apprenticeship opportunities and internships for students as they progress through the program. So they're involved in every single aspect of that program as it is rolled out. And so they're very heavily engaged, and they have a real stake in how it develops and how it evolves. And the same thing is true for the program broadly. There's a figure or a picture at the bottom of the page that shows some students sitting with some staff from TDOT, and this was at a career event where it's called Meet Your Mode, and so there were transportation focused industry partners that were present at every table, and the tables were defined by rail, river, runway, road. So we had all modes that we could think of represented there. And students rotated through the different tables to talk with the professionals and find out about how they got into their disciplines. They learned from all of this experience that there are so many different pathways. Everybody had a different background. Even somebody that might have the same job as someone else may have had a different way to get into it. And so that was very eye-opening for them. So there are activities like that. We have something called our Transportation CEO Series, where we bring in leaders in the industry to talk to the students about how they got to where they are today and what the most impactful part of their job is and how they make a difference in our communities. And I think then overall, the thing that is really developing out of this program is that culture of career. And so it's not thinking of high school anymore as just, that next stepping stone to whatever comes next, but it's starting to develop that career identity from the time you're in ninth grade and really starting to think through what does it mean to be a person in this particular profession, and where are my strengths and what are my interests, and how do I figure out what might be the right fit for me. And so then finally, I just wanted to share some additional resources at the K-12 level that all of us can use to get involved, whether you have a TSM Academy in your community or not. Everybody has elementary and middle and high schools in their area, and there are so many ways that transportation can be connected to math and science and other types of curriculum within the schools. And so the first link, or the first bullet there for the ITE STEM resources page, we actually have K-12 activities that are broken out by level. So there's elementary, there's middle, there's high school options. And within each of those lesson plans that you'll see on there, we have gone through and defined everything that we thought someone might need to know to be able to go out and replicate that activity in a classroom. So how long is it going to take you to prepare? What are the materials that you need? Any kind of background information you need in order to be prepared to deliver the activity. And I will also mention that we will be releasing a push for everybody within ITE to really figure out ways they can get involved for an event in November on National STEM Day. So we'll be sharing more about that in the coming months, but part of that will link back then to these ITE resources. And then the next one that I have listed is Nanosonic. And if you haven't checked out these lesson plans, you definitely should, because many of them are very much TSMO oriented. They are ITS-related lesson plans at both the middle and high school level. They're very in-depth. They're really impressive. I've used a lot of them with the programs that I direct out of the university, but also in some of the teacher training workshops that we have used or that we have led, and teachers have reported back excellent results from integrating these into their classrooms. And these are really well designed so that you could deliver a series of activities with a particular school or program over time. So definitely something to check out. We also have the Southeast Transportation Workforce Center's Transportation Academy lesson plans online as well. So I listed our site there too. So we've offered the summer program for several years now. It's actually for the students that are going into the TSMO Academy at East High School. And so each year we put the lesson plans online. And then the other point of connection I wanted to make sure to mention is the University Transportation Center program. So everybody has UTCs in their area within, or most everybody does within their area within a local university. And so connecting with them to find out what kinds of outreach programs they have and where they have needs for volunteers is another way to get engaged. So I just want to really emphasize the fact that it's important for all of us to be involved in this and to make sure that we're helping to develop that workforce of the future, and we're really heavily engaged, not just at the point of the pipeline where we interact on a daily basis. You know, and typically for most industry people, that's just in the workforce. But, you know, reaching back into all of the levels that it takes to feed that workforce into you. So with that, I will turn it back over to Patrick.
Yes, thank you so much to Todd and Stephanie, and as always, a wealth of information from them. I'm just going to take a moment to wrap up a couple of things. I wanted to also broaden what we really talk about when we say workforce development, right? And so the first thing that generally we should always keep perspective of is, what are the other industries doing? What are the top skills that are being looked at and sought after, and how do we encourage the development of those skills within transportation, and more importantly through kind of meaningful, ways. The LinkedIn likes to publish these, and they're kind of useful. What's interesting about the left column, the top 5 soft skills, the first 4, I believe, were on the list in 2019. The 5th one of emotional intelligence is something that's new, and that's becoming more and more useful, more and more desired. And when Todd was talking about paraprofessionals, in that definition, there was that key phrase of, exercising judgment. And that requires emotional intelligence when you're in a TMC and you're managing multiple incidents, or you're operating and you're handling, multiple requests coming in for different situations, or when you're in the field and you're dealing with motorists who have had an accident or an incident, and they're injured and you're helping them along. So that all requires these skills that we have to be on the lookout for. And then it's worth noting some of the hard skills that you can kind of specifically call out of, to get certifications or anything that you'll start to see the academic sector start to educate more of the next generation in understanding how to work with AI, how to work with blockchain and video production, UX design. The interesting note about video production is that there's people who think in the next 5 years, most of the content online is going to be very video heavy. So if you thought our, telecom networks were jammed up already, like you can just expect the video content to exponentially increase over the next couple of years. So keep those in mind. Keep those always on the lookout. Little by little, what we're going to start to do is try to share stories of how TSMO practitioners have been able to hire or develop people with these soft skills, or develop it into them. And so, one of the things that I will say we like to talk about, and I like to talk about, that is incredibly important for a lot of the next generation is understanding values and understanding their personal values. This, especially in one's career, probably gets introduced at like the management level or the leadership level, and they really talk about, what are your personal values, what are the organization's values. In my opinion, I think we need to be talking about it earlier, from when they're starting and just about to graduate. One kind of anecdotal story is if you pose a question to any graduating class, and you say, is it okay to sort of or lightly lie on your resume? You'll get very interesting responses. And, the fact of the matter is, you should never lie on your resume. That's just kind of the thing. And so it's important that, we challenge the next generation to make sure they are living their values, especially in their professional life and how they practice it. And it's becoming a little bit more where it shouldn't just be something sought out for leaders, because we can have leaders in every level. So I think that's something that we really should start to understand and encourage people to be a little bit more open about. So with that, what do we do? As an industry, one thing that's going to really accelerate how we get more positions and more people that are within TSMO is to start posting examples of hiring managers and HR departments that use the resources that we showed in our last couple of webinars of actual position descriptions with KSAs that have been developed and identified for various positions throughout the industry. And so we're going to try to compile that. We're going to try to put it together so that when someone in Virginia DOT or a private sector company, or a state DOT or an MPO uses any of our resources to create a job posting, they can share that job posting. You can start to see what it means when you take something that was more of this research-based approach and when it gets applied, and how do we apply that knowledge. The other thing that Todd and Stephanie has alluded to, there's a myriad of activities that we need to do, especially to define and understand and support the paraprofessionals, along with the regular professionals that we have in the industries and the practitioners that we have, especially in TSMO. And then, as Stephanie alluded to, there's a number of people in supportive roles that enable TSMO to happen. Your contract people that find ways to understand how to structure, performance-based contracting. Your HR folks that really get it, they help you, screen for those soft skills or for culture, like to make sure they fit into your organization's culture. Those people that support your functions and our functions in TSMO are also activities that we need to look at for. So those are on the horizon for us. When I say horizon for us in NOCoE, it's like it's literally in the next, we're going to be working on this for the next 3 to 5 years, starting today and continuing forward. One of the last thing I'll say, and one of the clearest examples I can give about our efforts on this is to launch a fellowship program, which we did. And we ended up with 6 cohort members that we're going to be able to kick off later this month. And so to give you some context, we've had DOTs kind of come to us and say, we really need resources or something for the early to mid-career people in TSMO, really developing that next generation of leaders, of managers, of just subject matter experts. And that's what this fellowship focuses on. It's really to ensure that we have the early to mid-career folks, people who might just be becoming promoted, or they just, a year or 2 out of grad school and they're working for the DOT, continuing their internship, taking a full-time position, somewhere along those lines. Those are the people that that you see represented in these 6 individuals. And this was actually building off of something we did with a pilot with Courtney Sell from Washington DOT. And, one of the best stories that I like to share is that when she went back, after she learned and she really got a handle on TSMO, and then we helped her with finding some resources, she really went back and tried to galvanize all of her peers in the other districts, in the other departments, at her level. So she spoke to her peers about the benefits of TSMO, the understanding of how things work, the openness, and just the integration and integrative win that you can get with TSMO. So we're really looking to accelerate that across the industry with this fellowship, and then keep continuing to grow it. And so that is something that we can celebrate. And if you're wondering, we'll definitely try to expand the program. But this is our first year, and we have a lot of activities kind of anticipated. But the key thing will be for these 6 fellows to work with their supervisors and identify, what their individual development areas are, and then see where the center, where NOCoE can actually support them as they go through that and just kind of work through that. But we're really excited for it. This is a nice opportunity to kind of make it real and make sure that we're giving opportunities for everyone in our industry to apply the knowledge that they get. And so with that, we wanted to get to our Q&A. And so if you have any questions that you've been thinking about throughout the time, please enter them in the chat box. I'm going to do something. I think most people are generally on their phones and they're muted. So I'm going to unmute everyone and try this out. Usually I don't do this on webinars because there's, depending on the number of people, but give me 1 second. And let me just make sure I get the correct code. And so last warning, if you are on your phone, make sure you stay mute if you don't want to speak. But if you do want to speak, you will be unmuted. Yeah. So great. Ati from Las Vegas has introduced a question, and then just a reminder, everyone is, you can speak kind of if you find an opportunity time to ask your question, but considering the interdisciplinary nature of TSMO, do you anticipate the professional TSMO career paths to require the traditional technical certification requirements such as PE, PTLE, etc.? Todd, you've got a couple of these initials after your name. Why don't you speak to that a little bit?
I guess what I've observed anecdotally is I'm starting to see some of that stripped away in position descriptions, just because of the desire for more diversity within, in this case, usually it's a concentration of traffic operations people. So I think it's changing all the way up from the entry level all the way up through management. I'm starting to see some of these requirements that have, within TSMO, they've been viewed as barriers because you can't get the right people in the job. But I guess on the counterpoint to that is if we do attract people and we do require licensure or certifications, we got to make sure that we have a career path for them. Like, so if we attract in, let's say, a mechanical engineer or an electrical engineer, that's a better example. We need to make sure that electrical engineers have a path to move and flourish within your organization. Many times there are real and perceived barriers to promotion. So I think that drives people away.
Yeah, great point. Stephanie, do you see any trends coming from a little bit more the academic, but looking at career paths for that framework for the industry as it relates to licensure?
Yeah, I think definitely. Particularly when you're looking at some of these positions that are kind of evolving and are developing in a more interdisciplinary fashion in the first place. I think those you definitely won't see the traditional requirements there. I think anything obviously that is still design heavy, you're going to see the certifications required. But I think more and more what we're seeing, particularly within TSMO and operations more broadly, is that the kind of people, as Todd was saying, that are required, they really have very diverse backgrounds. And so to get the people that you need, you can't have those limitations in terms of the certification requirements because those aren't necessarily relevant for the role that the person will play, and the skill sets and the expertise that are needed really come from areas outside the traditional engineering or civil engineering areas.
Yeah, and if I may, I think those points are really important. One thing to keep in mind, Ati, is the barriers within organizations of what is, considered senior level. So even if that career pathway is so important because in every generation, when you ask them when they start, what they like to see in an organization is that they have some way of advancing in their career, whatever that is. It could be becoming a subject matter expert, it could be a management position, it could be just more of a internal leader, but they want to see something. So every generation has kind of mentioned that, but those barriers are being identified and they're slowly being modified to anticipate and accommodate the next generation. But let me try this. Your phone should be unmuted, so if someone wants to speak up and ask a question, I'm gonna stop talking for a couple seconds to see if anyone wants to ask a question verbally. That's all right if you don't. If you want to, just unmute yourself and then just speak over me, and then I'll just stop. But another question I wanted to ask our speakers today is, everyone talks about soft skills as if we kind of understand where they come from, and probably everyone has their own story. But Todd and Stephanie, maybe Stephanie, you can go first. Like, where does even like the early career professionals or early career folks get soft skills? How do they develop them? Where do you usually send people?
Well, that's a really good question. And, I think that's something that we have struggled with a lot within civil engineering programs, because generally when we, do our stakeholder surveys with the employers that are hiring our students, and this is really across the board, not our program specifically, the things that come back in terms of really the needs and the areas where maybe we're missing the mark, it's never really about the technical content. It's always about that soft skill piece. whether it is the ability to work well in a team setting or whether it is demonstrating leadership characteristics and judgment, or whether it is strong communication skills, written or oral. Those are the things that we really see most frequently in terms of the feedback from employers, saying, hey, this is just not quite where it needs to be. And so I think we're having to look at different ways of developing that. One thing that I have done locally is, so we have something called our STEM Ambassador Program. And this is where we have our undergraduate STEM majors actually working directly in K-12 schools supporting STEM teaching and learning. And it's a really unique program that has a variety of benefits, certainly for the people that we're serving, but the biggest, I guess, bang for the buck from my standpoint is the fact that this, by far, has helped our students develop, and particularly engineering students, develop those really essential skills far better than anything that we've ever tried. And I think it's because they're having to work with a variety of people. So they're interacting with, K-12 students, and this could be elementary all the way to high school. But they're also interacting with teachers, and then they're interacting with the industry partners that are sponsoring them. And so it's just a variety of stakeholders that they're having to communicate with. And, they're having to learn to teach technical content at just a whole different range of levels. And so that has really caused just a huge uptick in the soft skills or core skill development for our students. And so I think it's programs like that. I think it's apprenticeships where students are getting the opportunity to have kind of that on-the-job experience at the same time that they are enrolled in related or relevant education and training. Apprenticeship models pretty much always have a component of soft skills training, and the one that we're developing locally will have that as well. So all students, whether they're in a university setting or they're in a community college, they will all start together in that same soft skills training course. So I think it's kind of in this different realm that we're really seeing the most success in developing that for students.
Yeah. Todd, what about you? Like, where do you send your junior engineers or anyone that's starting, working with you on a team? Like, how do you help them develop soft skills?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with, like Stephanie said, we're very good at teaching technical skills. Usually you levitate towards those technical skills in university environment for a variety of reasons. Some of those reasons are you may lack some other skills. So what I've always told people is, like, get involved, try to get out of your comfort zone once in a while. And that can be either personal or organized through an employer. I've been with employers that have started Toastmasters groups as one example. I've been with employers that have had book clubs on leadership. And then there's other things like using other professional, civic, or religious groups to push yourself in an area that you may not be fully comfortable, but it's a safe place to kind of just learn and stretch yourself a little bit. I personally got involved with first Lego League when I got out of college. It was fun, trying to teach, I don't know what it was, 4th or 5th graders. It was even extra challenging because it was a French immersion school. So I really had to pay attention because half the time some of the students were speaking in French and sometimes they were speaking in English. So that was fun.
Yeah. I think this is a very interesting question that maybe everyone can take back and, really ask yourself, like, if people say, you do this well, you do that well, like, where did you get those skills? And then even asking some of the next generation or even your current generation, your peer generation. I usually tell people I got my soft skills from working at the Gap and folding clothes and trying to do customer service to Black Friday customers, which is incredibly difficult and at the same time incredibly fun. So I'd like to encourage teenagers to at least used to try to work at retail. We got a couple minutes left, so I did want to provide another opportunity in case anyone had a question that they wanted to ask any of the speakers. So you can either type it or unmute yourself, and if you're having trouble with the audio, just let me know. But I'm going to just kind of do some quick announcements, so please interrupt with a question if you have it. All of our TSMO workforce resources are available at this first link here, but it's also available on transportationops.org/workforce, and then we also have our webinar series up there. One thing I wanted to mention now is that the workforce resources that you see are mostly from taking that NCHRP report and deconstructing it and making it work on our website. So I'll take a quick moment just to share that with you all. And as I bring it up, one thing that I wanted to mention about this is the ability for us to, where did it go? Sorry. Is the ability for us to, here we go. So, Todd and Stephanie, do me a favor and confirm that what you're going to see should be the NOCoE website.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. So if you were to come here and then you go to workforce development, what you're going to see are a number of different resources that we're starting to build out under this framework. This framework was really driven by the NCHRP project, and so you can see where we put what looks like original content, which it is, but that research paper and deconstructed it and then put it into different industry assessments that the report had, the HR resources. If I click there, this is where you're going to see descriptions and information on position descriptions, how roles are evolving. We also have every single one of the position descriptions that were available and created. This is the link on the left for the webinar series, and you can see from the first one all the way to the last one we just had, the videos and the slides are available here in one place for all of you to take advantage of. The paraprofessional white paper is also available here. This is the one that Todd presented on, and is a really good read. It's a quick read. So I'm scrolling through a little bit fast, but the main place for you to look at is just going to /workforce, transportationops.org/workforce, and just kind of seeing that be available for everyone. And if you have any questions, just letting us know. So with that, we got 5 minutes left. Todd and Stephanie, I'll let you kind of, if you have any parting words for the folks on the webinar before we wrap it up.
No, just thank you for the opportunity to share our, I guess what originally was our research, and hope that we can continue to increase the awareness on issues related to TSMO and its importance to the overall transportation industry.
Yeah, I just wanted to also say thank you as well, and thank you, Patrick, for your leadership on all of this. I think it's all really very important, and I just want to encourage everyone that's on the call today to take a look at those K-12 resources and really think about how you might be able to get involved, and particularly if you're an ITE member, you're going to see a push coming in the coming months for all of us to really get engaged for the event in November. So be thinking about ways that you might be able to use those resources to do that, because it makes it a really quick win. It's an easy lift. So and it makes such a huge impact.
Yeah. I really do want to thank Todd and Stephanie. They've been with me for so long in terms of working on these TSMO resources and being the PIs on that NCHRP project, just really delivering such a quality set of resources for all of us to take advantage of. And they did some great work. They made sure things were linked with what we're doing on the ground today. Positions are linked with their CMNs. They're looking at recruitment, retention, the entire gamut of HR, and we're just getting started. So they've also presented for the last, including this one, the last 4 webinars on this, and they've just been always answering yes to any call that we have for any ask I have of them as it relates to workforce development. And they're so involved in their communities. So I really thank both of you for wonderful presentations, wonderful insights from from the research team and from their, professional experience and knowledge to be able to work with us. I just wanted to lastly say the recording will be available within a couple of days on our website. You'll see it in those in that workforce session, and we will also be able to provide additional resources as they get developed and push them out to our newsletter. So if you're not signed up, please do. And with that, I wanted to thank everyone for joining and participating on our webinar, and have a wonderful rest of the week, and just stay in touch. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.